In today's episode, I wiggle a bumper like a maniac. And I also managed to fit an engine in the end. Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Caddy Mark 1 TDI swap. Now, for those of you who have watched part 1, you might remember me saying that this part will never fit. Well, that's going to be our first focus in this build, to make it fit. Therefore, we are going to start by fitting the engine. Yeah, I know. Some of you were probably thinking that, dude, that's not even on the correct side of the firewall. And yes, you are correct. But you see, I have a strong suspicion that I need to take out my grinder and make some alterations to said firewall. And I need to know the space between my TDI engine and said firewall. So let's begin. Alright, and here we have it. The 1.9 TDI ALH. And this is not original because, first of all, I have fully rebuilt the engine with bearings all the way around, and gaskets and seals and everything. Plus, it has bigger injector nozzles, 0.216 if I remember correctly. And this pump has been disassembled and has a bigger plunger or piston. I'm not actually sure what you call it. Something. The original is 10 millimeter in diameter, of course. And the one that's in here now is 11 millimeter. With a larger turbo, this could probably put out 150, 160 horse, perhaps even more. Not really sure. I'm going to bench it later. Now, to fit this in here, we are going to start by pressing in the engine bushings and gearbox bushings into the mounts and stick them on the engine. Now, when it comes to the engine side, this can be a little tricky. I actually had to look this up because you do have a rubber spot here as well as these four. So you could orient it like this or like this. But what it comes down to is this. You have to remember that when your engine hangs, this will get centered by the weight. So just remember, the Y is supposed to orient like a Y does in the alphabet. Alright then, time for the gearbox side. And since this is a V-shape with the rubber insert, you also have an arrow, but even if you didn't, remember that the bolt that goes through here is stationary, which means the engine, or this gearbox side in this case, will hang from the bolt. So you don't want to fit it this way, because then you will pull on the rubber and you will pull this hole even more from the center. And with the bushings ready to go, it's now time to disassemble the timing belt side of the engine. Okay, so turns out I have the wrong mount for the timing belt side here. This, which I purchased in my kit, is for a different style TDI engine. And this is not Epitech's fault, this is my fault, because I could have done my research beforehand, but I just saw an 1.9 TDI kit and didn't look any further. You can see clearly on their website that the timing belt side is a bit different. It's an older style TDI that this mount is for, and that style TDI has the water pump down here, so it's not driven from the timing belt. Also, it doesn't have this idler here. But I sifted through their website and I found another engine mount which looks a bit different and is for a 1.8T engine. It doesn't specifically say that it's for a 1.9 TDI of the newer style, but looking at it on the pictures, it looks like the 1.8T block is identical because it is going to tie into, let me just shift the light. It's going to tie into this and this hole here. I ordered that one and I might have to do some minor alterations. Otherwise, it's just a complete bolt-on. But we can at least continue with the disassembly while waiting for it. Try it again. All right. I had to wait a couple of weeks because the Swedish Postal Service decided to not notify me that my package had arrived. But here it is. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I could not find a mount specified for the newer style TDI. What I did find was that the 1.8T mount looks like it will fit the 1.9 TDI block from the newer style. And I mean, look at this. How many companies ship with foam? I mean, Epitech really cares about their products making it safely. So here we have the new style mount. And as you can see, it looks quite a bit different from the earlier mount, which just went, it was much thinner and was supposed to have a bolt hole here where my water pump is. Now, what I suspect I'm going to have to do on this mount is to drill it out here somewhere, because somewhere around here is my idler pulley, but no biggie. This is going to save me a heap of time anyway, and I mean, look at the thickness of this material. Yeah. Hit Epitech up if you want to do a TDI conversion or a gasoline conversion. They have for VR6s as well. Again, not sponsored, but I really like their products. Yeah, let's go and see if this will fit and cut out the plastic, of course, beforehand. Then we can press in the bushing in the correct mount instead of just doing a useless amount of work on the other one, which is there. So yeah, let's do it. What we are going to do next is we are going to snip the plastic from about here, the top of that bolt hole, and move over here to this bolt hole here. And of course downward, like a triangle shape here. And there we have it. Now the next step is to blow all of this debris out, which is also why you need to remove the timing belt, because you could potentially cut this with it in place, but then you have loads of debris down here which you won't be able to remove, and it's going to prematurely wear out your timing belt. So let's clean out the threads and blow all of this shit away, and then we can continue. Now for these 3 holes, they are M10 by 1.5 millimeters if you're going to use a tap like I am. So don't use a 1.25 or something. And also use some lubricant, that's always better. And will you look at that, the mount actually fits. So now we know the 1.8T mounts fits perfectly on the newer style 1.9 TDI. This is awesome.
And after tracing out where the idler roller sits, it's time for the grinder to get some action.
There, I could at least keep the wrench. And there you have it. Fully functional engine mount. So yeah, it's clearing that all right. And I'm quite happy that I managed to save that logo. It looks cool, even though I will probably not see it for a few years until it's time for another timing belt.
Moving on to the engine mount located in the front. I had to exercise my grinder again since I have a knock sensor in the way. In addition to cutting this area out to clear the knock sensor, I also had to nick this corner off because it fouled on the block.
Now it's time for this one, which is this one right here, and that fits snugly like so. Whoops, too far. Like so.
But I jumped the gun a bit because the holes were a smaller diameter and also full of caked road dirt, which is to be expected from a workhorse engine, soon to be 20 years old after all. Well, a 10mm drill bit takes care of that easily enough.
There you have it. And there's also free space for the plug that goes under here. Sweet!
When it comes to the last mount, I actually installed it incorrectly, because pictures from Epitech's website showed it fastened to these 2 bolts, while it's actually supposed to be fastened to these 3 bolts. So, don't make my mistake, because this caused a lot of clearance issues and headache issues while installing the engine. Since it wasn't obvious, this was the problem until after it was in.
You are supplied with new bolts. Alright, so I encountered a small little setback that you can't really twist it. So I don't know why. If I, for example, have a bigger diff housing on this particular gearbox, this is an EWY gearbox. What I mean by that is an O2J, and the particular code for this variant is EWY. So if any of you guys know if the diffs are larger on this gearbox rather than other O2J styles, please let me know in the comments, because I think it's rather weird. Okay, so a few minutes with the grinder later and we have this. As you can see, I just rounded them off. There!
And with just one more hurdle before we can lower the engine into the engine bay, we need to swap out this tired old rear torque bushing for the new one.
I must admit, I lied to you. In order to fit this strengthening plate, we need to fit this first, the bumper, because that one gets screwed into this. But this is just easy peasy. I said this is easy peasy. Now we just need to find the bolt holes. There we have one. And there we have two. All right. Now we can jump in the car. I want to get bigger washers here later, but for the time being I could only find 24 millimeters in outer diameter. So that's a problem for another time. This will do for a test setup, and I'm going to leave this loose because I don't know the end orientation, so to speak. So I have a few more things I want to do. I want to remove this steering column, paddle box and brake booster before fitting the engine, because I don't think they will be in the way, the brake booster I mean, but I'm going to fit a larger brake booster anyway, so why not remove it when I don't have a huge engine in place.
But before we can remove the brake booster and master cylinder, we need to remove this retaining pin on the brake pedal first.
So camera died while unbolting the brake booster, but I was just about to pull it when this camera started beeping at me. Alright, so it is finally time. The engine is ready here, already strapped up the front. Oh, and the orientation here. Yeah, I thought I would Mount it the way old Saabs were. Gearbox in the front, engine in the rear. What do you think? Alright, let's do this. Alright, up you go, Caddy. This is going to be really interesting. The 1.8 that was in here, yeah, you should remove it like this. Well, reverse of this. But this engine is way too big, so up we go. Alright, so take two then. Let's see if this goes. Do you see something wrong in this picture?
Yeah, obviously I meant to remove the bonnet at this stage. I mean, it would have just been weird to remove it beforehand, right?
You know, this might just work. Might. Alright, so here's the situation. This is too big to fit when installing it from above. The engine is too wide, so I would have to strip like everything to get it to fit from the bottom. Perhaps if I remove this, it might just work. Might. Big emphasis on that. Bad news incoming. That is my AC compressor. And as you can see down here, it is supposed to be seated here. Well, there is something in the way, and I'm definitely not going to remove this, since I don't want to twist the front end. So I don't really have a solution for where to mount the AC compressor right now, because I need to have space for a radiator and an intercooler in front of the radiator. Also, I believe I have to reposition this mount by snipping this off and shortening it, because as you can see, the hole is here and way over here. So it isn't even close to where it's supposed to be, which I suspect is another problem with me not having the correct engine for this swap mount kit. So anyway, it's late or early, whatever you want to call it. I am tired. See you tomorrow.
And with the batteries recharged the day after, it's now time to modify the front engine mount. Oh, and I took the liberty of sparing you viewers the boring part of watching me cut this mount in two pieces. And here we have the finished product, after a quick clean with the wire brush. Now, one side did turn out kinda ugly, but I'm happy to announce that it's the side that nobody's going to see anyway. So I don't care.
I'm actually fairly pleased how that mount turned out.
I think that will do it for this episode. Now in the next episode, you're going to hear this baby run, because I want to make sure it runs in stock form, because I'm going to do some alterations to the harness and some other stuff. So make it run stock, then get going with everything else. And yeah, I said I was going to focus on the firewall, but I want to hear this run because that's a boost to my motivation. So see you in the next one.